We got married in September 2016, and I am older, and so is Cam. So we immediately started trying to have babies right after we got married. We probably tried about 4 months before we talked to our doctor and tried to see if we needed to get any testing. We then did some fertility testing in Birmingham at a clinic there. They couldn't really figure out what our problem was. So we tried to do IUI a couple of times. That did not work. We ended up going to a clinic in Colorado Center for Reproductive Medicine. They immediately figured out our issue, and we kind of went from there and have 2 babies, Clements and Rue, that are 5.5 and 2. Anything you want to add to that?
I would just say it's a stressful process for anybody. I mean, luckily we had the financial resources to do it. I mean, it still was a strain, but also it's the unknown. Is this going to work? We hope it works. We really want kids, but we've gone through all these tests and all this, and there's still not an answer. I can't imagine, particularly on the resource side, how you would handle it if you didn't have the resources. We were lucky we did, but the emotional stress, it creates problems. I mean, it creates a lot of stress because you really want to have kids, and you're wondering, is this going to work or not? And it's just the unknown that really scares you the most.
Once we started the process, it was pretty smooth for us. We only had to do 1 egg retrieval, got 4 embryos, but it starts with you go and do your testing, and then you started injecting yourself a lot of hormones, shots, estrogen pills, progesterone shots. We did that for a few months. Then you kind of give your body a little bit of a break before you start right back getting ready for a transfer. Our first transfer was in January, so we really only had a month and a half. You're hoping and praying it works. You're still taking all kinds of medicine. Some of the emotional and hard parts of pregnancy were probably due to all the hormones that I had before. I was you can attest to this. My pregnancies were not easy emotional. Anxiety, depression, a lot of things that I don't talk about a lot. I was sick for longer than the first trimester. And I don't know that it's because of the extra hormones, but I know that didn't help because your body's already stressed out. It's already pushed to the max. And then you add pregnancy to it. And that's just, pregnancy's so hard on your body anyway. So I think that all of that combined and then just the emotional stress of it made my actual pregnancies not pleasant.
The real reason we couldn't was my fertility issues, not hers. So I was the problem, not her. And so you're already going into it with that. And then seeing her go through the emotion of she never had children before. We both wanted kids, no question. And to see her go through that stress, it's stressful for both of us, but I realized how much more was on her. And you could see the emotion. It's an everyday deal. And it's, now that we look back, we can both kind of laugh.
About some of it, not all of it.
Laugh at some of it. But at the time, it's the most stressful thing any couple could ever go through. It really is. And I dare say it's tough on the marriage because, you are snapping at each other. You're just angry and upset because you want this to go right, but the unknown drives you to say, well, what if this doesn't work? We did all this for nothing. There's a lot of emotions that go into it. And anyone who says otherwise just hasn't been through it.
Since it was his issue, I never want him to feel guilty because I wouldn't want to feel guilty it was my issue. So then you have that, like, I'm doing all of this, but I didn't want him to feel bad and feel like it was his fault that I was having to do all this. So you're trying to compensate from that, from the marriage and the emotional standpoint. And it's just, I feel like we weathered it pretty well, but it doesn't mean it was easy.
It's not easy, no.
When we found out about this a few weeks ago, I don't even know my initial response. Confused and not really understanding because, it's a Supreme Court ruling based on a law. So there's a lot that goes into that. The Supreme Court's trying to interpret our law, and our law is what needs to be changed. So there was some of that from the legal perspective. So we were both attorneys. But at the same time, honestly, the first thing I said to him is, I'm really glad we have 2 embryos left. I'm really glad they're not here. I don't want to get emotional. But I'm just really thankful that while other people are having to deal with that and deal with their process being cut short in the middle, thankfully ours are not here. And that's really sad that had to be one of my first thoughts, and then it turned to more of the anger and the confusion and the what ifs. Gosh, if we hadn't been able to go through this, we wouldn't have had our babies. And I don't pause often enough to really think about that and how thankful. I mean, our doctors, our clinic, like they became like family to us. I mean, my doctor in Colorado, I love her. I wish that I could be friends with her and see her all the time. They were just so great. And so sometimes I think I take a step back and really think about how grateful I am, but then also just realizing like that it could have not happened. I mean, we could not have any embryos, and our embryos could be here, and we could be dealing. I mean, that's part of the emotional part is I can't imagine if we had those 2 embryos here and all the things that would entail right now, or being in the middle of the process, spending all that money, all those hormones, all the emotions, and getting that phone call. Never mind, that's not happening. And I think it's just, when you really sit back and think about it, it's a lot.
It was a stupid ruling. It was dumb. And that's my honest opinion. And maybe I'm putting my political hat on, former elected official. It was a dumb ruling. Because you have families out there who are pro-life, by the way. If they weren't pro-life, they wouldn't want kids. They want children. They want to produce life. But to have a ruling like this that says, no, we're going to put all these barriers in place, that's not pro-life. That's hurting people's opportunity to bring children into the world. And I think I'm pro-life, Lindsey's pro-life, we all are. And to put this barrier in place, yeah, it made me mad too. Because everybody should have that right to have children. And if they want to have children, there's nothing more pro-life than that. And I think it was a huge stretch of state law to come up with the interpretation they came up with. The court took an interpretation that went way beyond what the 2018 law did. What the 2018 law was, I call it the guinea pig law. What was going on at the time was there was a group out there saying, we really want to overturn Roe v. Wade. If you make exceptions, then it cuts into a previous legal argument that was made in front of the Supreme Court. They realized the only way they could legally get another reversal under Roe v. Wade was they had to come with an absolute bill. I was in the Senate, voted for it. And there was a very, very heated conversation that was had, most of it behind closed doors, of the folks who were voting for it. I remember a debate coming up where I said, if we don't have the 3 exceptions, in 4 or 5 years, we're going to get some ruling that's going to really give us grief. And we're going to pay a big price for this nationally. And of course, I was in the minority on it, and I tried to offer that amendment. I lost, and some others were with me somewhere. I voted for the bill in the end, and I could try to justify it every which way but lose. And deep down, I'm pro-life. We need pro-life laws. We need to protect the unborn. But I also made a political calculation. Not saying it's right. I'm saying that's what happened. I mean, everybody can call it what they want to call it. Let's be truthful here, what happened. And I did. And do I regret it? I regret not having those exceptions in there that would have prevented this kind of case here from happening. I can say now, I'm looking back and going, boy, I wish I'd have been wiser back then or more forceful. But yeah, we should have had those exceptions.
Well, and even with those exceptions, those probably wouldn't have helped in this situation. But I think because we had been through it, you knew that this kind of thing, I think, could end up happening because we had been through the IVF process. And because we talked about it. I mean, down the road, is this going to be an issue? And here we are, and it is.
I really thought, I said, somewhere down the road, this is going to come back and bite all of us. And not because it was pro-life. Totally agree. I think you should have had some exceptions, though, what I call practical. Legal and philosophical is great, but you also have to have pragmatic circumstances where people can't have kids. Or there's a life, or my wife's life is in jeopardy, or there was an incest. Sometimes philosophy and political willpower is one thing. Being practical and how it affects people's families is totally different.
Well, I'll be open and honest right now. Even though we have fertility issues, I have an IUD because even if we did decide to have another child, we would use one of our embryos because it's been tested and we know that it's viable. So where does that line stop? I think that does concern me as a female because what are we going to do next? Say nobody can take birth control? I don't think that's coming next, but the way things are going, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think she raised a good point, too, on this, is that we're in an era, not just in Alabama, but everywhere, where we seem to be in a political atmosphere of, I'm going to one-up you. You did this, but I'm going to be tougher than you are. I'm going to do this. And we tend to up the ante so much that you get to a point that you finally, when you get to the end, you go, holy moly, why did we do this? We've gone too far. And I'm not saying it's here yet, but I'm saying, well, she raised a good point. Where's it in? Is it going to be the morning after, or is it going to be birth control in general?
Right. And as females, I mean, we don't have as many of those kinds of conversations, but my close friends that have been through it and other ones that deal with the legislature and just in general, I mean, those conversations are like, what happens if you go through IVF and then have a miscarriage? Like, how is that going to be handled? Where do we draw the line there? So there's just a lot of concern, I think, about is this as far as it's going to go, or are we going to keep going in that direction and having even more problems down the line?
And I think when the abortion bill was passed, this IVF was not one of those, and fairness, probably because most people hadn't gone through it. But I will say this was not an issue that anybody foresaw in any public or private conversation. But again, it comes back to sometimes there's unintended consequences with any legislation. So that can happen. I feel very good about some of the lawmakers right now who are trying to fix this problem. They're doing what they think is right. Because remember, even though the law was passed, this was a pretty extensive, far-reaching judicial opinion that kind of put the lawmakers in the spot where they're doing this.
I think all lawmakers, if I were talking to them and telling them my story, like, just take a step back and look at the personal. I mean, it's so hard to make it personal when you're up there sometimes because you're in a hurry and there's all these bills being passed, and this is a deeply personal thing and you can't understand it unless you've been through it. And it's really hard to convey that to lawmakers or anybody. If more people get out there and talk about it, a lot of people would realize they know families that have been through it. So I just hope they really take a step back and think about these people, and this is their families. These are kids. Like, think about your own kids, and if you couldn't have them, I mean, I can imagine not having our two. Do they drive us crazy a lot? Yes. But, I mean, I love them more than anything and can't imagine them not being in our lives. So I just hope they realize how important it is on a personal level to people.
Yeah, no, it's that, and that's the point. It's a personal issue, and it's not red, blue, purple. It's not rural. It's not urban, suburban. It's not Republican, Democrat. It's not black or white. And so, debating this issue is like Lindsey said. It's not about a philosophical argument. It's about people and it's real life impact. I mean, basically, when you debate this or discuss this, the conversation has to be, am I going to say, Lindsey, you can have kids or you can't? That gets to the bone. And I think that's a debate that needs to occur. And I think there are, like I said, there are lawmakers over there who are really trying to push that debate and want to make it happen, to react to this court case. But that being said, it's about people. It's not politics. It's not about my party or your party. It's about people having families and wanting to make a family. That's the bottom line.